Over 500 subscribers. Wow. When I started this channel, I did it mostly so I could learn more about my swords by reviewing them. I certainly didn't expect to have this many subscribers, let alone in less than a year. If I could, I'd thank each and every one of you personally for your support. To celebrate this milestone, I'm going to be reviewing the sword featured in my profile picture and channel banner. This is an Albion Talhoffer blade that has been re-hilted by legendary bronzesmith Geoffrey Robinson. The Talhoffer is one of the many 15A swords Albion makes. These are thrust-focused swords. While they maintain the ability to cut, that is not their primary purpose. To that end, they typically feature a thick blade that is on the rigid side. They'll usually have a flattened diamond cross-section, although there are some that are hollow ground. With the development of armor reducing the effectiveness of cutting techniques, thrusting swords like the 15A grew more important, leading to use from the end of the 13th century all the way into the early 16th. The customization on this sword started with a bare blade from Albion. The previous owner sent it to Geoffrey Robinson, who extended the tang, link in the description to a process he uses to do this, and then custom sculpted the molds for the bronze crossguard and pommel. He assembled everything, put his own grip on the sword, and sent it off to the previous owner. According to his website, the cost of this customization would be between $1,500 and $2,000 US. After I bought this sword from the previous owner, I commissioned a scabbard from Todd's workshop for £735, roughly $1,000 at the time. From ordering to receiving the scabbard, the wait was approximately 2 months. Todd's workshop focuses on historical accuracy in his scabbards, and I think it shows with this one. It's simple in the overall look, but gorgeous in the details, especially the bronze pieces. I think the decorative embellishments on the rain flaps and the chape both go really well with the bronze hilt, so bravo to Todd for his selection without having the sword in hand. The fit of the sword to the scabbard is good. There's only a little rattle, and it retains the sword pretty well. The bronze fittings on the belt do cause some issues when moving it around, however. They're heavy and tend to easily get in the way. Unfortunately, they also seem to be a little missized. I can't get the tip at the end of the belt through the buckle. It seems to be just a bit too large for the frame. Now, since I don't ever plan on wearing the sword and scabbard, this isn't a functional problem per se, but it is disappointing in a $1,000 scabbard. Of course, it's also possible I'm missing something incredibly simple. I'll never rule out user error. Moving on to the hilt, the pommel is kind of, but not really a wheel pommel. It's certainly inspired by them, but the fanciful nature of its swirls takes it to a different place, at least in my mind. The bronze work here is just outstanding. The design is beautiful, and there's a lot of detail in the casting. There's also a lot of depth to the design, although I think it would be even better if it tapered in thickness just a little. The peen on the pommel is formed into an attractive shape. While it's not quite as clean and even as a standard Albion peen, it's still very nicely executed, and I think it looks good. Handling-wise, none of the edges on the pommel are sharp, and in dry handling the sword without any impacts, I can easily grip the pommel without any discomfort. Once I cut with it, however, I quickly learned this is not a good idea. Several cuts resulted in some very unpleasant reverberations shooting through the pommel into my hand. This was easily fixed by simply moving my offhand fully onto the grip, which has plenty of room. The grip is elliptical in shape, tapering in thickness towards the pommel. It's a pretty simple style with only 2 risers, one on each end. They aren't particularly well defined, certainly not up to the standard of an Albion or Valiant armory, but they're not what I would call sloppy either. The same goes for the cord wrap texture. It's there, but it almost looks and feels faded somehow. What is sloppy is the seam in the leather. It wanders all over the place, but it's only noticeable when looking close, and I don't feel it at all. So overall, the grip is the least striking part of the hilt, being a little on the plain side of understated. But it still feels good to hold, and indexing the blade is no problem at all. The crossguard, like the pommel, doesn't adhere to any historical types, although it bears some resemblance to a Type 10. The bronze work here is again excellent, with crisp lines and excellent attention to detail. It has started to develop a little bit of patina, but that's completely normal for bronze. The gap where the blade meets the crossguard is what I'd consider perfect. I don't think there's really any way you could get it any smaller without extreme levels of precise machining. And now it's time to talk about the business end, the blade. As per usual, here are the measurements I took of it. As you can see, this is a beefy blade. It starts nearly 9mm thick and exhibits gradual distal taper down to about 3.5mm at the tip. This geometry is designed to make the blade very stiff, only flexing much in the last 25% near the tip. When you consider that a 15A sword was primarily intended for thrusting in between the gaps in armor, it makes a lot of sense for the sword to need that degree of rigidity. The tip is very acute and remains considerably thicker than most swords. It's not what I would consider reinforced, because to me, that implies the thickness swells at the tip, rather than remaining thick like on the Talhoffer. Finish-wise, the blade is very typical of the Albions I've had. A nice satin polish that's very even, perhaps a little more even than the Albions I'm used to. There are some noticeable tool markings in the polish, especially near the crossguard, but I personally don't think it detracts from the look. I believe Albion bare blades don't come with their finished polish, which means that this would be the work of Mr. Robinson. Moving on to handling. First off, this is not a light sword. Even the standard Albion Talhoffer is 3 pounds 5 ounces, about 1.5 kilograms, and the longer hilt combined with the bronze furniture adds more weight, bringing it up to 3 pounds 12 ounces, or just under 1.7 kilograms. It doesn't feel heavy at all, however, mostly due to the point of balance being only 1 3/4 inches, about 4.5 centimeters. That makes the sword feel very lively in the hand, with excellent control of the blade and a great connection to the tip. Before test cutting, let's take a moment to compare this sword to a couple others I've reviewed. My Tom Kinder 16A, and the Valiant Armory Atrim Collaboration Vision Tauber. Alright, so what I've got here are 3 different swords, including the Talhoffer I'm reviewing today. I'm just going to do a little bit of comparison as how they feel, just to give you a bit better idea what they're like. So this is the Talhoffer. It's a heavy sword, but it doesn't really feel heavy because it's so well balanced. Next up, we have my Tom Kinder Type 16. This sword is one of my favorites just because of how agile, nimble it is, how much detail there is in it. I will say the Talhoffer, I feel like I have a bit better point control with it, and that's probably because point of balance is brought back so close to the crossguard. And here we have the Vision Tauber, my newest sword. This one just feels like it's not even there. I feel like I have just about the same point control, maybe a little bit less than the Talhoffer, but it just feels so perfect in the hand. Really is the sweetest handling sword I own. So yeah, after picking those two up and feeling them compared to the Talhoffer, this one definitely does feel heavier. It doesn't feel heavy, but it definitely has more blade presence, that's for sure. And now let's take a look at some cutting footage. While watching this, please keep in mind 2 things. First, this sword is primarily designed for thrusting. Second, I'm still quite the amateur at cutting with swords. I'm sure it would perform better in the hands of somebody more competent. So, that performed considerably better than I expected. I honestly thought it was going to be a challenge to get clean cuts with this sword, but instead almost all of them were clean, and I even had some of my best cuts with it. Maybe I was just having a good day, but regardless, for a thrust-focused sword, it will cut. Talking bottom line about this sword is kind of difficult. I bought it secondhand at what I consider a pretty steeply discounted price, and it was most certainly worth that price. Brand new, including the price of the bare blade from Albion, the sword would probably cost around $2,000 US, perhaps a few hundred more. I do think it's worth that price though. The bronze work is excellent, and it combines with a beautiful Albion blade to make a simply stunning sword. Once again, I want to thank every one of you for subscribing to my channel. Your support means so much to me, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch my reviews. We're well on our way to 1,000 subscribers, which just blows my mind. Now just to tease you a little bit, I'll be reviewing a certain dream sword I own to celebrate that landmark. But anyways, that's all for me today. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I try to read and reply to all of them. Until next time, Alien Toot out.